However, it's a very important agreement. Many of the TPP countries are in RCEP. And the backbone of RCEP is the willingness of China to provide finance for all kinds of infrastructure in the other RCEP countries, the One Belt, One Road initiative and other Chinese initiatives. So that's what China can run with. And it could be a very successful agreement, but I don't think it's as strong as a free trade agreement as the TPP could have been.
Okay.
And thank you very much for
Thank you
having
very
me.
much, Mr. Hofbauer. Really appreciate it. Hope to have you again in the near future. And now let me have you, Mr. Liu, here in Beijing. Professor Liu, what do you make of the differences, RCEP in terms of level and weight compared to TPP?
Well, RCEP is a free trade agreement per se. It's only focused on lowering the threshold at the gate, where you do not really have to have a common standard as how to pay
Which
your
is lower the
backyard.
tariffs.
That's right.
It's not
it's
necessarily about the IPR, not necessarily about environmental protection, not necessarily about labor issues.
That's right. Not to mention about labor standard and market entry, etc. And having said that, actually, while RCEP is excluding America and TPP is including China, the top two big trading partner and the big economies, I think the best situation, ideally, would that we are able to combine the essence, if not the format, of TPP with the RCEP, so that both of those economies can be included, and both can really contribute to the further integration and collaboration instead of playing a zero-sum game.
Mr. Lester, is that possible?
It's possible, but it will be difficult, and I agree with that. There's talk of a free trade area of the Asia Pacific that would include all of these countries, and I think that's a wonderful idea in theory, and I would support anyone who wanted to pursue that. But when you bring in that many countries with so many diverse views, if you have the U.S., China, and India all in there, it becomes very difficult. You run the risk of spending 5 or 7 years talking about these things and never reaching an agreement. But nevertheless, if people decide that that's the best approach to all of this, if the Trump administration would get on board with this, which may be unlikely, I would definitely support that effort, but it will be a challenge.
I want to follow up by asking you, Mr. Lester, because you are originally from the U.S., so TPP, at the very beginning at least, have been perceived as an economic aspect of the overall U.S. entry into the Asia Pacific, the so-called rebalance. And it excludes China with a purpose. And now, if President-elect Trump scrap off TPP, what kind of message do you think, in terms even of U.S.-China relations, that is likely to send?
As complicated as U.S. trade policy is, and as hard as it is for us to figure out what a Trump administration might do, I think foreign policy is even more difficult. So President Obama made the pivot to Asia a centerpiece of his foreign policy. It was rebalancing, going from the Middle East and shifting to Asia because this was going to be the Asian century. We don't know a lot about what the Trump administration, the Trump people think about this issue. They've talked a lot about the Middle East and interventions that we may do there. They haven't said much about what approach to Asian policy would be. Now, my sense is they'll similarly to President Obama, they will want to constrain China in some general way, but they haven't put forward any specific proposals for how they might do that. And some people would say, well, the TPP was part of that. Well, if the Trump administration pulls out of the TPP, what would they do instead? And I don't think we have any insights on that, but presumably something. Maybe they will realize the TPP is the perfect vehicle to do that. It might take them a few months or a year to get to that point.
I see. Ms. Lim, you are more a geopolitical scholar, particularly on the issue of Korean Peninsula. But at this point, we see politics and economics are certainly intermingled, particularly when you see a new administration coming into the office. So it's a mixed signal, it seems, the specific announcement by President-elect Trump made. From your perspective, How much is it related to geopolitics? How much is it related to the trade mechanism do you think he's likely to build? Or how much does it have to do with the so-called learning curve?
Yes, yeah, this is a fantastic question, actually. So-called the hub and spoke system. U.S. has been the hub and the spokes countries, including like Philippines, Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. It's not only about the military security alliance. It has been more like comprehensive, much system. Of course, I do hear the concerned voices from American side. This huge deficit, trade deficit, is not sustainable anymore. I do see that rationales, but at the same time, that purchasing power has been leading all the system until today. So if the U.S. is in some ways, shrinking or withdrawing that the kind of economic / political leverage over the region, it might necessarily again the influence to the security issues as well. So that's again the major concern of South Korea, probably of Japan as well. As long as the North Korea's threats, if threats from North Korea doesn't stop, we definitely need the security alliance. So that I think that's kind of overarching concerns of the spokes countries or alliance.
One movement of the chess likely to influence all arms of the overall game, it seems. Professor Liu, you heard from Ms. Lim that South Korea, like some of the other countries, are prepared for all possibilities. They have bilateral, they have different kinds of regional mechanism anyway. So whether it's TPP or something else, they're going to look for their own way. What about for China? Is RCEP really the solution? FTAAP, as Mr. Lester just mentioned, how far is it from the horizon? Is China this golden opportunity? Some say a zero-sum game, you said it's not, but people would look at China and say, your time to be the leadership.
Well, I think the question is to China is that, are we ready? And right now we are still busy with our Belt and Road program, and so far we do not have a very clear and transparent and well-constructed rules for the Belt and Road program, where we do not have a rivalry as the United States. So, and right now with the RCEP, but actually China is working with ASEAN more actively. So China is not really playing the only leadership role, although China is most influential. So the big question is that we need to be ready to grasp this opportunity, and also we need also to be prepared for a number of scenarios of what really comes out of the White House, what really comes out of the Congress. So if they really morph, China will have to change the strategy with the changes in the different variables.
We'll see. So many variables, in fact. Everybody is not certain about what's likely to happen, but that's the fun of our discussion, isn't it? Professor Liu Baocheng, Mr. Simon Lester, and Ms. Yinzhang Lim, thank you so much for the three of you for joining us. Thank you. Really appreciate it. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. Watch out for hidden books in the Chinese subway car. One publishing house has hidden nearly 10,000 books in a bid to promote reading. But is this a feasible plan? These days, some lucky subway passengers in cities like Beijing, Hangzhou, and Shanghai might stumble upon a book or two during their commute. This recent project is inspired by Books on the Underground, a community campaign in London which aims to promote reading. But is this really feasible in China?
Inspired by this, one publishing firm replicated it in China. And after several days, differing voices among commuters started to grow.
I think it's a great idea. Make sure there are a couple of English books so I can read them as well when I take the tube.
But our subways are too crowded during rush hours, and not many people know about it.
Now, besides the problem of a cramped subway, some books were also left untouched. Passengers thought they were left there by others to reserve seats, and some books were also mistakenly taken away by cleaners. Even so, The campaign has earned the endorsement of some celebrities. However, many social media users question the motives of the book sharing drive itself. There were criticisms of it being an eye-grabbing marketing event that did little to encourage reading. Experts also say the book sharing activity may not suit Chinese society.
Firstly, China doesn't have many celebrities like Emma Watson who can make a social impact. Secondly, in China, books are sold relatively cheaper than in Western countries, and some people may feel uncomfortable taking an item that doesn't belong to them.
The organizer of the campaign says it is confident the idea will work in the long run and will continue to offer books on the subway. And perhaps as more people understand this movement, the situation might change. So, would you pick up one to read and pass on?
And for more on this rising movement, we are now joined in Beijing studio by Professor David Moser, Academic Director of the Chinese Studies at the Capital Normal University. Also joining us is Professor Li Hua, Associate Professor of Creative Writing from the English Department at Renmin University of China. Meanwhile, joining us from London, we are glad to have Ms. Cordelia Oxley, who is the Director of the Books of the Underground herself. Welcome to the three of you. First of all, let's go to Ms. Oxley. What do you make that your movement is spreading around the world, even here in China, big cities?
Is that for me? Sorry?
Sure.
Yes, I think it's amazing. So we've been doing it since 2012, and recently we've got more and more awareness and lots of newspapers talking about us. And then when Emma Watson joined in a few weeks ago, a lot of people around the world want to set up their own projects, which is fantastic.
Do you think that could be a successful movement, though, Professor Li, in Beijing?
Well, I just heard about the news yesterday, and well, at first my reaction was not very positive. But as I started to read more articles about this, I think my mind started to be more open. And I think, imagine if it's me, happen to find a book that I love, I think it will be a very happy surprise for me.
Probably we need to brief our viewers a little bit, Ms. Oxley, as to how it works.